right, let me get this turned on here. Yeah, thanks for helping. I know it's so late where you're at. It's like,
yeah, no, that's okay. It worked out fine.
let me turn this on here. All right, everyone. Thanks for hopping on to this week's session about making multifamily money. So actually this week I want to mix it up a little bit. I brought on Will Bachoven. I hope I said that correctly.
Perfect.
And it's kind of funny. Well, so I invest in apartment complex, mobile home parks. I think, Will, you do, I think, retail, commercial, and triple net.
Correct.
And it's kind of funny. I, at one point, thought apartments is too much work. Mobile home parks too much work. I want to do what you're doing. And you had the reverse, that you want to do what I'm doing. So I just thought that it'd be great to kind of hear your perspective as to, retail, commercial, as well as triple net. And then, I can obviously answer some questions as to regards to apartments and mobile home parks. So Will, take it away. Floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Well, first, I don't get into a lot of hype. I mean, I'll tell you exactly how it really is. And you're exactly right. Retail shopping centers is pretty much what I focus on. There's a very wide range of retail. I mean, from QSR, like quick service restaurants, single tenant net lease, I think you've heard of STNL.
Yeah.
And it just, there's a very wide range. But strip shopping centers, is there anything specific you want to know about them, or you want me to just elaborate, or how they're set up?
Just a high level overview about your experience. I'm the same way as you. I'm super transparent about my apartments and my mobile home park. So just as much candid honesty as you can give. I think that I find that valuable in the audience.
Gotcha. Well, I'll start with kind of just a description of what they are precisely and kind of drill down with that. So a strip shopping center, a community center, is going to be something that has one anchor tenant, which is a larger type tenant. And then there are a successive inline 1,500 to 2,000 square foot tenants. So usually these are 20,000 square feet total. They sit on about 3 acres. They're made of cinder block, and then they have what we call gingerbreading at the top, which is basically all the type of architecture you see, veneer. And it starts usually with an anchor tenant, and that could be a credit tenant, which is like a familiar name, like a Dollar Tree or a Family Dollar, and smaller tenants, which are either franchises or locally owned restaurants or retailers or whatnot. Usually the end caps are going to be the most sought after. They operate, so there's 3 kinds of net. There's net lease, there's double net, and triple net. And I don't care what anybody says. I always like to see it spelled out in the lease agreement, because now you have absolute triple net. But basically the idea is this: the tenant pays for your taxes and your insurance and the common area maintenance. That's basically the logistics of it. That is seemingly a dream, but it's not always the best idea. For example, a lot of people say, well, this is great, they can pay my taxes and insurance, but a lot of tenants have caps. So in other words, what does that mean? That means that if you purchase a property and the tax rate goes up, the tenant has inside their lease agreement a cap, a maximum amount that they're willing to pay for a tax. And if they don't pay, then the landlord has to pay. It's also a negotiation. It depends on how you collect these common area maintenances. If you're doing it monthly or annually, I won't say it's easy. Tenants that are retail are similar to tenants that are residential. I mean, there's hardships and everything. There are some good trade-offs, but there's a lot of challenges with retail as well. And we all know what's going on in the space, that it's more experiential. So in other words, if you're going to go to a nail shop or get your hair cut, those are seemingly doing well. But the Amazon type effect is having an effect across the board. It's redefining retail, and I don't think it's slowing anything. That's kind of like the broad overview. I'm probably a little better with Q&A, but we have, so I personally manage and own in partnership about 6 of these things.
Okay.
And I started as a broker, and a lot of people call me and say, well, how do you get started in something like that? And it's very simple. What I did was I took the commission that I would have made and I rolled it in as a junior partner on the deal. And
Smart.
in turn, I manage the property. And the partners I have are between 3 and 5 and sometimes 7 on each deal. And these assets range from 3 to 7 million. That's kind of the sweet spot that I operate in. And I don't, you have to be very careful because you don't want to create a security. I know all these people, I know them well. I don't want to get into security law and offering memorandums. These are basically just limited liability companies that are put together. I'm a member like the rest of them, and I manage it and help with the books and the accounting and all the above. But that's how I got started. And I think I've been doing this successfully for about 3.5 years now.
Okay. I guess some questions I kind of had was, because I looked at this asset class before, specifically like I think Dollar General or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find these Dollar Generals in kind of like a market where you're at, where it's like about $1 to $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
And what appealed to me about it is like an absolute triple net. So basically, they take care of everything; they just pay me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always just thought, well, what's nice about this is like if I were to syndicate, you know exactly like what your return is, because there's no variable cost for the most part if it's absolute triple net. So you can easily say, whatever I'm getting paid, $20,000, after my mortgage, maybe I net 5,000 and I split it, whatever that split is. So that's what appealed to me. But then on the flip side, at high level, all I really know is when you do commercial, you're just buying the lease essentially. That's the most valuable thing about the property is you're buying a lease. And when you look at these like Dollar Generals, it's almost like self-storage, just like 4 walls. That's like sheet metal. And what's to say that like after their 20-year lease, they just build a brand new one like across the street, you just move there. Now you basically own a building that's not worth anything, because if you don't have a lease tenant there, it's like worth absolutely nothing. So it's almost like you have to like sell it midway, right? Like maybe you buy year 0, if it's 25-year lease, you sell it by year 10. So you just got easy income for like 10 years and then sell it. So that's what I always kind of thought, but I want to get your thoughts on that type of model.
So yeah, I'll take a few things apart. I can kind of pull that slow motion, take it apart. So what you're referring to, people talk about an absolute triple net. A lot of people call that mailbox money. And it operates much like a bond. And in that case, the tenant, like Dollar General, it's true. You do virtually nothing. It's an absolute triple net lease where you just collect a check and that's it. So you never get a call, or you hardly ever would get a call from the tenant saying, hey, the roof is caving in or the parking lot needs to be swept. They take care of all that. That's an absolute. So a strip shopping center that I own is going to be a net, a double net. So I still have to pay some things like inside the lease agreement, I still have to pay the roof. And also I have to calculate, I have to do all those CAM reconciliations, all the accounting, and that eats a lot of time to create budgets. And, with half a dozen of these things, you can imagine it takes a long time. So it's not quite a dream. But what you're talking about, to go back to it really quick, the single tenant net lease, it's similar. It's very popular with like Wendy's and Chick-fil-A and Starbucks, same thing. But I think you're very limited. And my personal opinion about Dollar General is if you look at where these markets are, it's like what you said. When you take all the signage down, what are you really left with? Is it really worth? I'm not convinced it is. Now, my shopping centers, I think they are high visibility, retail corridors. So that's a little different. So two separate issues there. I think, in my opinion, the time and place to purchase a single tenant net lease is when you graduate to that. That's a strategy most people employ, where they've, firsthand what it's like to own and operate MHPs. That's a very high touch product. Multifamily, again, very high touch. There's renovations and whatnot. So at some point in your career, you'll graduate, or you might want to consider graduating towards and exchanging, saying, look, I've made a lot of money. Let's call off the dogs. Let's roll it into a 1031 into a single tenant net lease. That's my opinion.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's what I've heard too, where like it's usually more seasoned investors where they've, basically did all the sweat equity, right? And now they just want to kind of coast. And that's when they switch it over to what you said, like, like Walgreens, CVS, Starbucks. And then basically it's just mailbox money. So, okay, great.
Because at
I
some
guess,
point your time's going to be very important, and it's going to be more important. So anyways, I just want to throw that in there. So
great. And I guess my question is like, what does the typical, I guess, loan terms look like? And I guess, how do most people get into it? Like, let's just say someone like me, where I've like, have a background in apartments or single family. Like, how would I go into like what you're doing?
well, first, I'm a broker and I'm biased, but I'm not, I'm kind of odd in that I kind of just trade for my own account. I'm a broker when it's convenient for me. The first thing I think would be worthwhile is to find a good broker. I know this is kind of a controversial that a lot of there's certain shops out there that prefer to just be the listing agent and deal directly with the principal. That would be you, but I would advise at least talking with a good triple net broker that only specializes in net leased properties. Number one, that's the first thing. Number two, the other question is, well, what about loan to value LTV? Well, when rates were low, you could really make something work. I'll tell you, with ours in shopping centers, we were able to get by with 20% down. We highly leveraged these. I don't
Yeah.
suggest that. And rates were a lot lower. I mean, ours were sub 4%. We were pretty fortunate. But at some point I would, if you can, there's an argument for cash, really, if you're willing not to. But I'd say 50%, 50% LTV right now is probably the way to go. And there's a season for these. We might not be in the season right now. That's a whole nother talk, about what's going on with interest rates. But I think timing it. So your question is, how do I get involved? Talk to a very good broker. And then second, make sure the season is right. And then third, your investment cycle. Like, because when I talk with people, I'm financially advising them. So make sure that it's harmonious with the rest of your investments.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's why I heard it was around like maybe 35 to 50% leverage. Is a loan amortized over like 20 years or 25, 30?
20 to 25 years is the norm. I haven't seen 30 for a retail product. And also something to consider with a commercial loan is, unlike a residential loan, which is a 30-year fixed, these loans are only good for like 5 or 7 years. So what does that mean? So if you purchase it now today, well, in 5 years, you have to refinance. That's just the nature of commercial.
Yeah, you have to basically sell it or cash out refinance or do a refinance. Okay, great. And I mean, if you listen to my other videos, I'm a little bit hard on brokers, specifically like multifamily brokers and mobile home park brokers.
Well, you should. Whenever I hear you, I'm a big fan. When I hear you talk about it, I smile like he's right on the money. So I completely agree with everything you say.
Yeah, I if you listen to my other ones, I kind of give a lot of flack, and it's just kind of like I get so many off market deals sent to me, even to this day, and I'm just like, like literally they're pricing this at like maximum value. The expenses are clearly fabricated. They're saying 35%. I know it's going to be 55% Oklahoma, and they're charging at 65,000 per unit. And I know that like that's top market. Like if I'm paying 65,000 per unit, everything better be renovated and nice,
What I
right?
tell people is that you date your real estate broker and you
Yes,
marry a property manager.
yes,
And
yes, yes.
so like I'm not, but I have my own small firm. I mean, you're talking to like 50% of the firm right now. So, but I've got another property manager and he has all the fancy designations, CCIM, CPM, whatnot. But no, absolutely. I see some of these operating memorandums and I like, okay, this is great. Now let me see the real numbers. Let me see the T12. And you have to verify everything. And again, that's a whole nother conversation, but you are spot on. You have to verify everything.
Yeah, that's the point I had, because like you said, if you're coming in brand new without any baseline knowledge, you're just gonna, like, if I, let's just say I own no real estate, right? And like I want to get into it, of course, like my nature as like a pharmacist is like, oh well, you're the expert, I should trust you. But then the other side of being a pharmacist, we're skeptical as hell. That's her nature.
Yeah, that's
uh,
right.
so that's why we always like, I trust but verify, right? Like even like my mobile home park, like when I bought it, my property manager's been in the industry for 30 years, but of course they're getting paid too when I close on the park, right? So they have some financial incentive to want to sell it to me and kind of sugarcoat it, for lack of a better word. And then when I take over, I'm like, wait a second, like this is like crazy. Like, when I bought the park, I thought I was gonna break even. And then now I take over the park and my expense like doubled, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's just kind of like, so unfortunately, maybe it's just me, but like I'm kind of almost a type where like I have to try it and then I'll fail or something, or like make mistakes along the way, and then that's how I kind of learn. And that's what bases my channel, is just kind of sharing that. So no, great for that insight. I guess like when you said you own about 6 right now, like what's kind of your mindset when you buy it? Like is it kind of like a buy and hold, like cash out refinance this, or do you want to like kind of sell it after like a couple years? Like what's your kind of
Our strategy is buy and long-term hold. These are in my portfolio, this is the workhorse of my portfolio. I mean, these are long-term assets in the city. I mean, I know the city really well. I know Louisville extremely well. And yeah, for us, we don't have any desire to trade out of them anytime soon. There is a strategy if you're looking for that, like that some people will employ, and it goes something like this. If you buy a relatively new asset, around, a certain, it could be 7, 8 years. That's when mechanicals start failing, parking lots and roofs start leaking, and HVAC and some of the bigger things. So a lot of people will build, stabilize, get some seasoning, hold on to it, and then they'll roll out of it and get a new property. That's I've got a development background as well, and it sounds very exotic and fascinating, but it's an incredible amount of work, and I don't know if I'll do another one anytime soon.
Got it. Hey, is it possible? Can you run like numbers through one of your deals, if possible?
Yeah, I can give you like a high point on one of them. So,
Yeah.
like one off the top of my head, I'm thinking about. So, we have it's Dollar Tree anchored, 22,000 square foot shopping center, south end of Louisville, which is like working class area.
Yeah.
Good people, factories and whatnot. 4.5 million. We put 20% down. It's about a 7 cap. 7, if your listeners know what a capitalization rate is. It's basically your operating income. That's about the long and short of it. I mean, we've had that since July 8th of 2020.
Is that a single tenant? Just the Dollar Tree?
No, got 7 tenants. So there's a Dollar Tree, and then there are a number of inline suites that range. So Dollar Tree takes about 12,000 square feet. And then there are a series of there's an optician, there's a Jimmy John's, there's a Tropical Smoothie Cafe, there's a State Farm Insurance, and it just kind of goes on from there.
Okay. I mean, when you bought it, were all of them occupied, or did you have to kind of fill some of them?
It was 100% occupied at the time, and we have had one vacant. We always have about one vacancy, and that's something that's really, I'll tell you, that is an enormous challenge, is filling a vacancy. Residential, you fill a vacancy. It's just a matter of adjusting the price, and you're going to get someone probably in 2 weeks or so, like I'd imagine for an apartment.
Yes.
In retail, that's a very good point you brought up, by the way. In retail, you can have a vacancy, and if you market it correctly, it can be 6 to 7, 8 months, a year. And we have one right now, right about a year, the vacancy. Yeah.
So when you bought that, like, tell me, like, what will that due diligence process look like for that 7?
Due diligence, the first thing, you nailed it, is I want to see the lease agreements. And I read through it. And I'm not a lawyer, but I look through it. I'm pretty familiar with all the provisions. There's a lot of strategies inside retail as well, but there's a whole vernacular for the asset class. There's tenant improvements, there's permitting, there's rent concessions, there's CAM. I read through diligently all the lease agreements. There's rent escalations.
Yes.
That's going to be about 80% of my focus. It's very tedious. These lease agreements, some of them, are, Dollar Tree, let's say, is 140 pages.
Yeah.
Some are 10. Read through those. So that's first and foremost. Second, our third parties will kind of report back the condition of the building.
Mm-hmm.
So that will give me an idea there. And then, I'll do drive and kind of.
Yeah. Man, if that was me, I would just go to that dollar store every day. buy something. That's okay. So I imagine like you probably spent the most time on the dollar store lease, right? Because that seems like it's the anchor. So it's like the most important part. I mean, how did that lease look like? Like when you took over it, like was it halfway through? Was it at the beginning? Like what did that lease look like? And like I guess what made you
Right. So they still had a very long term, and by a long term, 15 more years. You know,
okay.
it's a big box is hard to fill up.
Yeah.
It's challenging for anyone, even for a very well-known broker. But they had 15 years, and so usually it's a 5-year option to renew for the tenant. So it's in 5-year increments, and then there's a step up for each one.
Yeah.
Now, something else is interesting is there are provisions that the other tenants have that is based on Dollar Tree. So, for example, let's say it's a small retail shop
Mhm.
that sells clothing. Well, they might have a clause that reads that if Dollar Tree were to go dark, if they were to leave,
Oh,
then this tenant has the right to leave as well. So there are these lot of things to look at, a lot of things to look for.
that terrifies me because basically the whole value of that retail center is based on the Dollar Tree, right? If they leave, you might have other leases that say,
Yeah,
hey, if they're don't renew, because yeah, I see it like it's like 15 years left, but they can leave after year 5. And then to
correct.
your point, if they leave, it's gonna take you 6 to 12 months to like fill this vacancy because it's a very specific area. So okay, yeah, that I guess that would kind of terrify me that like basically they kind of control you in a way.
Yeah,
In a way.
well, oh, absolutely. You know, that's the thing. I used to when I first and I've always been I kind of be modest and humble and whatnot. When I first purchased these, I represent people for the purchase of them, our clients. I was very, proud. I'm a big owner. These are big shopping centers, and I wouldn't announce myself, but if I saw someone, I said, "Hey, if there's any problems, let me know. I'm the owner." Uh, some of these credit tenants, they don't care. I could call all day long to their real estate department. They call the shots. So I'm very much tending to their needs. It's not the other way around.
Got
So
it. It's like for
yeah,
me, I would feel like because you lose a little bit of control, right? Because like obviously in my apartments, like I could make people not renew a lease if there's a bad tenant or evict them.
yeah.
It's like and then immediately just fix it up, whatever 2 to 4 weeks, and then rent it out within like another 2 to 4 weeks, right? So
Consider, here's something else to consider. That's very true. So you
yeah,
can do incremental adjusting.
yeah,
If you have a commercial tenant
uh-huh,
and you write a lease, now in some of my leases, I have provisions that will ratchet up with the consumer price index, and those are a
got it.
little more complicated. But let's say I write a lease and it was 2018
Mhm.
and inflation's low. What if we write these leases out and I could be stuck kind of at this dollar rate that doesn't really adjust.
Yeah,
So, what happens? I'm going to lose money. Whereas if you have a residential tenant, you can adjust it every year. Okay, rent's 1,000. Hey, there's inflation. Okay, now it's 1,200. Do a forced improvement. Now it's 1,400.
yeah, exactly.
I hope I'm not talking everyone out of retail, but it's these are the
No,
real things.
no, like my thing is like I always think the grass is greener until I do it myself. I'm just like, oh geez, it's not. Like I thought mobile home parks would be so much greener than apartments, and like I'm hopefully selling my mobile home park here like next week. Knock on wood, it doesn't fall apart. But I'm just like, oh my god, like the amount of like stress and like heartburn that this deal gave me. Like I might be traumatized to do another mobile home park like that again. Versus like apartments where like I just kind of know it and it's like very simple. And as long as I have like good reserves, I'm not like stressing, right? So I can kind of do that a little more passively. So no, thanks for that the context. Because I did like I remember when I even knew nothing, I made like offers on something similar where I think it was anchored by like some like laundromat. And then next to it would be like, restaurants, like a haircut place, a tattoo parlor, like typical stuff like that next door. And um, it just kind of appealed to me because like, I owned a pharmacy for a little bit too. And we would just pay, it was a part of a retail strip and we would just pay every month. I was just like, oh my God, we don't like landlords didn't do anything. Like we take care of everything for them.
Right.
And, but it was vacant for like you said, 6 to 12 months before that. So just because you're getting whatever $3,000 net is not really true, because you have to factor in that you might have a vacancy of 6 to 12 months. So, okay, great. I guess for like investor, what would you recommend in terms of like retail commercial? Like which one would you, I know you kind of alluded earlier, like single tenant, absolute triple net is for people who want to just, they did all the sweat equity like me, maybe me in like 20 years, right? Maybe I earned that right to go there. But I guess like, how would you recommend it for somebody who's like trying to build their wealth through it?
Sure. Well, if they're starting, well, first of all, I think it's always good to get experience with residential tenants, whether it's like apartments or single family. I just think that's a good place to start.
Okay.
I think just being a student and observing for at least a year, minimum of a year. There's some well-known websites to kind of get on message boards and just kind of cross-verify information. One thing I really like to do is to get on. I'm not advertising here, but Crexy, and I get on, and I think you can create a free account. And I just download dozens and dozens of operating memorandums, and I study each one very carefully to determine exactly what expenses are. And if you do that long enough, it's incredibly boring. But if you do it long enough, you'll build this intuitive sense and determine, okay, this is a good property and this is not, or something's going on here. So really just being a student and studying it, walking around, looking at these things. And then for the first purchase, I think, again, they're very similar, these single tenants. Starbucks in Milwaukee is going to be very similar to Starbucks in Nashville. I mean, there might be a similar thing. If you're really interested, I think the best prediction of success is the property in the path of progress? Back up and look at the bigger demographic. Is there building going on? Is it seem to be going one way? And the best thing to do is look in your own backyard, and you can kind of get a sense like, well, it seems to be expanding here or there, is to do that. I think also not putting so much of a focus on cash flow. I think you can have one or the other. You can have appreciation or cash flow. I don't think you can have both. So for the people that I work with, they have a little bit higher of a net worth and they're not so interested in cash flow. It's just more taxes. So they're trying to kind of determine where the path of progress is and the potential gain for the future. Their paydays in the future. So that's I hope that answered it a little bit. But being a student of scale first, at least a year.
Yeah, I mean, I know like people do that to preserve their wealth, right? Like once you hit that level where you're worth like, 50 to 100 million, you just want to preserve your wealth. You don't really care. You want to preserve that wealth and make it be a little more passive, quote unquote, right?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
Okay, got it. That's great context. Cause like for me, it was kind of funny because like, I sent out mailers, if you know my story, like in Oklahoma, and the database and prop stream is not perfect, right? So I always got like apartment complexes. Sometimes you get like duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, but I also got some commercial buildings sent to me. And, just being a student, as you mentioned, I would just underwrite those deals myself too. And I remember one deal I had was in Enid, Oklahoma, and I actually own a 20 unit there right now. And it was a medical office building right across the street from a hospital. So that hospital basically rented out multiple floors. And I just remember looking at it and, they wanted like 2.5 million, which I was like, oh, that's not terrible. And I think it was like 7 tenants and they're all like a different specialty, right? Because I work in healthcare, so I know like hospitals, right? I know medical. So they had like an oncology center. They had like a gastroenterology center. They had an orthopedic center. But I just remember like looking at it, like looking at the leases, I'm just like, all of them were like expiring in like 1 to 2 years. And that's what kind of turned me away. And I kept on telling the broker, because I sent a letter, but they just had me to work with the broker. I just said that, well, like, then the broker isn't saying that, oh, they verbally agreed to do it. I'm like, that doesn't do anything for me. It has to be written. Like, I know at least that much. Like, if you don't write it, it's nothing. Like, you can say this all you want. So I just said that, it looks great. Like, I remember it was like an 8% cash on cash. I mean, I only knew cash on cash return, back then. It was 8% cash on cash return day one. And I knew, like, okay, well, as long as the hospital's operational, like they're probably going to stay because it's literally across the street. So, I'm curious to know your thoughts on that. I mean, I remember looking at all the leases, but yeah, they were all due in like a year or two, which
No, and that's why I like a bank is, your banking relationship is very important too. And that's one thing I want to mention. I deal with, again, I feel like I'm repetitive because a lot of this information is pretty easily
Yeah.
accessible, but small community bank, very important. I know when their loan committee's meeting, I know the market president, that's the kind of banking that I like. So your bank will be a partner too and help you look at this. And a bank will actually, if you have a bank with a good real estate department that's small enough that's willing to talk with you,
Yeah.
they're going to point to some of these things and say, hey, we have a problem with these lease agreements. They almost act like a partner because that's their collateral. So
Yeah.
you can talk to them and get pointers from it. So that's been helpful for me.
No, I'm glad you said that because actually I had like 3 lenders I was working with, and actually one lender had the loan on the current medical office building, right?
Mhm.
And like to your point, I could say, hey, like these are the leases, like what do you think? And then they're just like, yeah, they have to renew these leases because they're putting in 75% equity sometimes in the deal. So like you said, like I forgot to mention that the lender is often your big brother kind of behind your back
Yeah.
watching you to make sure you don't buy something stupid because ultimately, if you fail, they take over the property and it better be worth something. So no, I'm glad you said, I guess I never progressed that far. I was just kind of turned off already. But I just remember that sticking point was always like, yeah, like, hey, like I'm waiting for the lease to be renewed. But I guess the waiting game was on my favor because like, honestly, I didn't own it. Right. I just could say, hey, like, did you renew the lease? Did you renew the leases? Did you renew leases? And you just can be that like squeaky wheel. So
Well, you absolutely have to, and you have to be awkward. And because a lot of brokers, and I'm going to pick on them, I'm a broker, I have my own firm. They're in sales. Their job is to sell. And the math that is taught to sell a certain way, and it's just the truth. It's the truth of the matter. So, and no one's going to tell you. You have to discern all these things. You have to tease out the numbers and ask the hard questions. And a lot of things too. Another thing people say was, "Oh, just get a property manager. Just hire a property manager." And well, you've heard, and I'm sure you've experienced that you have to manage the manager, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And then you go too far, and then you realize you're doing the manager's job, and then it's this game. Yeah. So
That's how I feel in mobile home parks right now. Like I literally have an on-site manager who's managing a renovation crew. I have an off-site manager managing the off-site manager. I still have to like be super engaged in managing the off-site manager, uh, like despite that layered approach. So, okay, great. I guess no, thanks for sharing all that value. I think that gave me and the audience a lot of perspective as to like retail. I always kind of thought of it like what you kind of alluded to, like it's more like once you built your wealth and you want to kind of preserve it and be a little more passive. That's the way I always thought about it. And thank you for solidifying that mindset for me. Yeah, I guess turn the camera around. I guess what question did you have for like apartments or mobile home parks? So I can kind of give
I
you some value.
the question that everybody has is where are they going? So I'm representing someone now for a pretty large multifamily transaction. I'm right in the thick of it right now, and it's between 7 and 10 million, and
Ooh,
it's
how many units is it?
well, if it depends on how you look at it because there's the potential, like we could add more, 300 plus,
Wow.
so
Okay.
400, and so I've learned a little bit there, but that's not for me. I'm just experiencing vicariously through my clients. But I guess my question would be, where it's the question everybody has, like, where is multifamily going? I mean, it's insanely competitive now,
Yeah.
and has been for the past 5 years. Is it going to continue? Do you see it that way? What's the future going to look like from?
Yeah, no, great question. And I guess going back to the deal you're representing, I mean, 8 million for 300 units, that's like 27K per unit. That's a pretty good deal. It's probably a heavy value add, I'm assuming.
Yes, if you saw these, I don't want to
Yeah.
say anything discouraging, but yeah,
Yeah.
they're
But like
great.
just off those numbers, I already kind of know you're buying it for 27K per unit. And let's say you put in 10 to 15K per unit. So maybe you're all in, let's say close to like $40,000 per unit. But if they're worth, let's say 50 to 60 per unit when they're done, that's your margin, right? That's just a super high level. And if you do the 1% rule, like if your unit is 40K per unit, you can rent these for at least $400 each. I mean, there you go, right? You hit your 1% rule per unit. So that's kind of how I look at like units now. And like that was like similar in my deal in Oklahoma. I got it for about, I think, 22K per unit. I'm putting in 10K. It's gonna be worth actually 65K per unit. It actually went up a bit. But to your question, like for me, the way I kind of view multifamily, I'm a little bit unique in the sense of like I actually don't really pay much attention to like the news. To me, I think the news is like too negative. That's what gets views, right? That's what gets clicks. That's what gets views. That's what gets attention. Where our human brain is wired to be fear based, right? So if I tell you here's 5 ways you can mess up in real estate versus here's 5 ways to do well in real estate, the one that's 5 ways that you'll fail will do better, right? That's just kind of human nature. But for me, the way I teach, all my students or even in the YouTube channel is like basically you just have to buy right. And you can buy right in any market, right? So like if you buy an apartment complex, like I bought my 26 unit, I had $250,000. Oh wait, no, it was $250,000 equity day one. I bought it with $250,000 equity day one. So even if I flop on this deal, I know I can flip it and still make money, right? But also on top of that, so I bought money into equity day one. But number 2 is the rents were $350. I can double it to $700 after renovation of $10K. And if you double the value of rents, I'm doubling the value of the asset, right? So if it's worth $750 day one and I double the rent, it's now worth $1.5 million after I'm done with it, right? So I basically bought it for $500,000 and I can force about $1 million in appreciation, maybe putting in $200,000-$300,000 in the deal, right? So like you can't lose that way. It doesn't matter what the interest rates are. It doesn't matter how the market's doing. That's how I kind of play, right? And then for me, like I bought all 3 of my assets, my mobile home park, 2 apartments during 2021 when interest rates were really low. It was super competitive. And I always tell people, you pick your poison. If interest rates are really low, it's hyper competitive. People are overpaying for the property. Versus now interest rates are higher, but then maybe, the purchase price, interest rates are higher, but there's less competition because maybe people aren't as enthusiastic, right? Maybe the people who like just want to buy 1 or 2, they might be kind of weeded out. I mean, obviously the big players are still going to be doing it regardless. So for me, I just kind of say like you pick your poison. And for me, I consistently buy real estate in every market. So you kind of dollar cost average buying real estate, right? So like I said, I bought a lot of my deals when interest rates were really low, it's hyper competitive, and I went off market. I sent letters out. I didn't work with brokers. I didn't work with I just sent letters out. I worked direct to the owner, like all 3 of my deals. I didn't have a middleman involved. I did it all myself. But I think now, I guess to your point, I have a lot of students sending out letters too. I think it seems a little more stagnant. Like basically they're saying the same letter in the same market that I invested in. It seems a little bit more stagnant because I think apartment owners are like kind of wait to see where the market's going to shift. Obviously interest rates are so volatile. Every 3 months it changes based on the inflation index, right? And so one quarter goes up, 1 quarter goes down, 1 quarter goes up, 1 quarter goes down. So I think it's a little bit more stagnant, but I think because of that, if you can do creative financing, and I think that's where a lot of brokers struggle in, is if brokers can bring deals that's creatively financed. Because the moment I say creative finance to a broker, the first thing they think is this guy has no money, he's not serious, I'm gonna move on from him.
Yep.
That's been my experience. And the reason for that is either A, they don't understand it, or B, they just have other people they can work with, right? So that's why, like for me, like when a broker brings me a deal, I always ask questions like, well, hey, like I'll overpay this property if you give me terms, if you do creative financing. I kind of phrase that, right? Like I'll pay you I'll give you your price, you give me my terms. And if I overpay this property by $1 million, I'm going to ask for probably very low down and a very low interest rate, right? And good terms for that. So, it's kind of like, it helps marry the bridge where like some owners, because you work with them, they're fixated on a price, right? It doesn't matter. I don't know how they got that price. It just came to them for whatever reason. They're fixated on it. So I just say, I'll give you a price, but give me terms. Some people are willing to do that. So I think in this market, if you can take over some loans where they have really low interest rates, like 3 to 4%, and then you basically take it over creatively, I think you can actually kill in this market. But it's hard because I'm not actively, investing right now. I'm waiting for my deals to stabilize. I bought 90 units in 8 months during COVID, so I scaled rapidly. But so I'm just stabilizing my current assets. But once these are done, once I sold my mobile home park and my 2 apartments are cashed out refinance, I'm going to be back in the market to look at some more. So I'm not sure if I really answered your question there, but I
You
think
did. I had a quick follow-up question that's similar too. Is how do you really? This is another thing, and I listened to some of your podcasts on it. But what was the? How do you keep good people, like property managers and people to renovate? Like, how do you manage that, and especially how do you do it from a distance?
Oh yeah. So I'm in California. I work full time, right? I work pharmacy director. I work minimum between commute and my day job, 50, 60 hours a week, right? And then obviously, I invest in Oklahoma, Alabama, right? And I literally renovated 40 to 50 units this past year. So I'm basically a high level flipper, right? Just by myself, right? And for me, I really, really screen my property management general contractors very well. Like I actually have like interview checklists, for those in the course, or if you watch my videos on property management and general contractors, I talk a lot about it. But for me, 9 out of 10 property managers are terrible. 9 out of 10 contractors are terrible. So you kind of once you find that 1 out of 10, you got to treat them very well. And I think for me, because I'm a pharmacy director, I manage like 40, 50 pharmacists. So I'm used to managing large teams and like delegating, right? And like kind of trust but verify. So I think I do a lot of that. And I think it kind of like threw people off because I'm a little bit, I would say I'm an easier owner to work with. I'm obviously not a pushover, right? At the end of the day, I'm paying the bills and paying them and I want results, but I basically try to be very easy to work with. So I think it goes both ways, right? I'm not going to attract a top quality property manager or top quality general contractor if I'm not easy to work with. And I'm sure you're working with some owners like so hard to work with. Like they're so rude. And I get it, right? They want to protect their money. They are paying the bills, right? Like I'm paying like, I told my mobile home park, I'm like, I'm paying 5 people too much money to not collect rent. Like I literally say something. It's true. You look at my bank account. I literally am paying 5 people too much money, and why are collections this bad? Right? And I just said, like, what are we gonna do about this? Right? Because I just tell them my next steps is either A, the on-site needs to go, or B, you're gonna go as the off-site. so it's just being very I don't know how to I'm like very candid with them and very transparent, but also I want to remove their barriers too, right? So general contractors, what do they want? They want to be paid every Friday. So I'm never late with payments on Friday. Property managers, a lot of them, they'll give you ideas and tell you what to do, but at the end of the day, as the owner, you can dictate. You can. Let's say you're my property manager, Will. You can tell me, hey, Steven, these probably rent for like 600. I'm like, no, Will, I want to rent these for 700. And at that point, you're gonna be like, well, shoot, well, I know they're not gonna rent for 700, but I'm gonna do it just to appease this owner, right? But for me, I really kind of trust them, but I also verify, right? So I will say, hey, like I'll actually tell my contractor, like, how do you think I should renovate this property? And it throws all of them off. I tell my property manager, my general contractor, how would you renovate this? And I just tell them, I want this to look nice, clean, and modern, and tenant proof, and not cost me much money, but also maximize the rent. That's my criteria, right? And when you say that, it always leads to the same thing: LVP flooring, neutral color walls when you paint, right? Quartz countertops, laminate countertops. And you can repaint the kitchen cabinets, shaker cabinets, right? Like bathtub kits, right? It's the same copy and paste. So like I give them free range of like, you tell me what's popular in Oklahoma. I don't know what color design is popular in Oklahoma. If you ask me, I'll tell you white or light gray. That's all I know. Can't go wrong with neutrals, right? White. If you tell me everything's white or light gray, and then why I like that is because once they renovate one unit, you just copy and paste, right? If I'm renovating 26 units, you did one unit, copy that to the other 26 units. So once you built a system, it's easier for the contractor to know what to do. Hey, you did one already. You know how all that worked. And at that point, you're good, right? So, just having systems in place and then regularly communicate with them. Like, I'll be honest, I was doing like 3 huge heavy value add deals. So, like I dropped the ball on some, right? I dropped the ball off my apartments because I was so busy with my mobile home park. Like, I'll be honest. And what I did was, so what happened was I was renovating like 5 units in my 20 unit, but tenants were leaving, right? Because tenants will always leave whenever you have turnover. My battery's crapping out here. All right, 1 second. There you go. So basically, like when tenants were leaving, my property manager assumed that I want to renovate all those units. Really nice, like brand new. But I was assuming that they would like turn it and rent it out immediately. But because I didn't communicate that, I went like 3 months where nothing, I just had vacant units, right? And you have a hard money loan on this thing, I have 12 months, right? So it costed me 3 months. It costed me money, like, holding costs. It's costing me time, which is money, right? And now my hard money loan is due in like May, and I set myself back like 3 months, right? So like, because wasn't on them every week to say, hey, like, what are we doing these units? If I just asked that question, they would be like, oh, I thought we want to rent. I'm like, no, I don't want to rent those. Just turn it and then let's rent it out. Like at this point, I'd probably be done with my, fortunately I got to like, I was at 7, now I'm at 14, about 15 out of 20. I just need to get to 90% before I cash out refi. So about, 3 more and I'm done, right? But I could already be there at this point if I didn't let my eye off the ball, drop the ball, right? So that was a mistake that I made, right? Because I was so distracted by my mobile home park, and for good reason. I'm spending way more money on my mobile home park, so it makes sense that more of my time is going there. But that's how I kind of dropped the ball. So, for me, it's just that regular communication, and I give them a lot of free range, which may be a little bad if I try to raise money, because like I kind of let them like, hey, like let's talk big strategy, and then like this is my vision for how we renovate it. It's going to cost this much per unit, and then they'll do one, and I'll just ask for like progress photos like periodically. So what I do is like my contractor, let's say he finished renovating, or maybe after like 2 weeks of renovation, I have my property manager go in and take pictures, and they send it to me. And once I see those pictures, it kind of gives me a checkpoint to see how it's doing and see like, well, hey, I didn't expect that. Like, what's that? And then I'll constantly talk to them. So that's how I kind of do it. Like, it's not as structured as you think. But what I'm kind of learning too is like with working with like larger operators, like I was trying to sell my mobile home park to the 5th largest operator for mobile home park. I think they're the 5th largest. And just talking to them, I'm like, I literally handed the acquisition guy my mobile home park on a freaking platter. Like I emailed him. I'm like, what have you had a seller hand you a deal with all the financials? It's usually the other way. Usually the acquisition, like that's how different I am, right? Like that's how willing I am to go the extra mile because I know that time is money for me, right? I know that value very well. So that's why I act with such urgency in everything I do. Like I just tell them, hey, if you need me to approve a quote for like a renovation, I usually do it within like 30 to 60 minutes. Like I'll just say, hey, I'll look at it. I might have a couple of questions. I'll give you a call. Let's discuss. And then from there, I'll approve or say, let's modify this, and then I'll approve it. So I'm never the bottleneck, because imagine if, let's just say it took you 5 days to give me that quote, and then I take 5 days to respond to you. And then now the contractor has a 5-day delay. You just lost 15 days. Right? Versus if, let's say it took you 5 days and I only take 1 day or like an hour, I cut out like, maybe it's a 10-day delay instead of 15. Right? So all these little things add up. So imagine that's just one decision, and amplify that over a year where you're making like hundreds of decisions. So any delay is key. So that's how I kind of do it with them. So, I do put a lot of trust in my property managers to manage it. I think they do really appreciate it. Like I literally tell them like, hey, we should repaint the outside. I'm like, okay, what color do you want? And they're just like, what? I'm like, you tell me. I don't know. I don't like, what color do you think would do well? And they're just like, oh, we think like Chateau Brown and Fired Engine Red would do well in the doors. I'm like, all right, great. How much is the paint? Like what's the bid? So I literally give them that much trust, because like to me, I don't care, right? I don't know the market. They're my boots in the ground. But so I go through a really rigorous process to vetting my property manager, vetting my general contractor. And I think because I treat them so well, they feel like people are reciprocal by nature. It's human nature. So they feel like, oh, like I love working with Steven. Like they will do the best for me, right? Because they like working with me so much. And when they bring off-market deals, right? Because you can get off-market deals through property management, right? Because they're managing multiple apartments. They might be managing a 20 and say, hey, Steve, I heard this guy might want to sell. You want to put an offer? I'm like, sure, you can. I'll pay you whatever. Usually property managers are brokers too. I'll pay you whatever your commission, I'll take over the deal. And I already know the insights of the deal. So that's how I kind of do it. I haven't had a bad experience yet. I mean, for me, I kind of know human nature, I guess, in a way, because I manage so many people. Like, no one will ever care as much as you. A property manager could be great for the first 6 months, but then after 6 months, they might get complacent and start to get a little bit lazy. So at that point, that's when you have to start checking a little bit more again, and making them remember that, to be on it. And for me, I always have backups, right? So I have like 2 property managers lined up in case my current 2 aren't great. If they don't perform. And for me, I tell them, like, I'll give them a heads up, like, hey, like, this is not performing like how I expected. Like, if I don't see improvement in the next 2 months, like, I'm going to start looking, there's going to be some changes that need to happen. So, I'm pretty transparent in the process, but I'm like, well, what can we do? Like, what can we do to help? Like, I'll tell them, I'm like, hey, like, what can we do to rent the units as fast as possible? And the property manager will start telling me, like, oh, we can do a $60 move-in special. Right? Where they just pay $60 plus security deposit and they can move in. I did that. I rented out, 4 units immediately. Yeah, I just said that. And I would tell my property manager, hey, do you advertise on Facebook Marketplace? They're like, what's that? I'm like, that's the new Craigslist. You got to create a Facebook account, advertise my units on Facebook Marketplace. So I'm telling my property manager ideas on how to rent out my units. And then now they can do it for the other clients. So I'm actually helping their business in a way, right? Because that's what I did personally for my single family homes. I used Facebook Marketplace and I had great results. So, that's kind of been my strategy with that. Knock on wood, haven't had anything bad. I mean, there's always delays. It's funny, my first property manager was referred to me by a mentor. And then my second property manager, I kind of picked them myself. And in a weird way, the one that I picked myself actually seems like they're doing a little better actually than my one that was referred over to me. But overall, they have their pros and cons, right? Like, each property manager is never perfect. They have their pros and cons. Like, one might be good at like property man or like with renovations. This one, they're more good at operations and more organized to get my reports on time. In my 26 unit, they're kind of like, I think they're high achievers and like a lot of independence, but they might be bad at like communication and bad at like sending you reports on time. That's just kind of how it is, right? So you kind of so once you kind of know what their weaknesses are, that's when you know how to step in to like probe them. Like, okay, well, you're not great at this, so that requires me to call you, right? If you were great at emailing me these reports and communicating with me, I don't need to call you, right? It can be done digitally. So I know I kind of went on a little tangent there, but did that kind of give you some context and help there?
It did, and it also helps tremendously. I work with a variety of people, and you are a very informed owner. You're assertive, but you're informed, and that helps a lot too, because the property manager doesn't have to go through and spend a lot of time educating and explaining. You are anticipate these things. You're quick. You're analytical. You know the market, and I think that helps a lot. So that helps as an investor. I mean, you should never just blindly just rely where I think you're doing. You would be very easy to work with.
Yeah, as you can tell, because you're a broker. Because for me, I'm just like, hey, like I like this deal. Like I had one mobile home park that I end up closing contract. I just said, well, I would take this deal, but you have to give me $300,000 in seller concessions because this lagoon and well are not permanent, not to code, and this is going to cost me this much money to fix it. At that point, you throw the ball in their court. They said no, okay, contract's done. If they say yes, okay, we can continue to play ball, right? So for me, I always throw the ball in their court. I'm never the limiting step. I was like, this is when it makes sense for me. And like you said, I am informed, right? So property managers, right? Like a lot of them are lazy. They just say, hey, I just want to fix this problem. It's not my money, right? The first bid I get, I take it because I don't want to deal with it anymore. But a good property manager will be like, well, I'll give you 3, right? I got 3 bids and this is the best bid. Or like some property managers be like, hey, it's small town, right? This is a big small town. Hey, my brother-in-law, he skirts mobile homes, right? Then you have a kind of family, a little bit of collusion where you give them business. So but then you have to know the basics. Like I know it's going to cost about $900 to $1,000 to skirt a mobile home, right? I know it costs around maybe $800, $600 to $800 to get a brand new bathtub. Right. I know it's going to cost X like $1,500 just for new kitchen cabinets. Right. So, it's like once you kind of know this, the property managers can't really bullshit you after a while because you're like, I would say, hey, this sounds kind of expensive. Like, can we get another bid? Right? Because I would just say, yeah, this is how much I paid for these units I renovated. Like, why is this one more?
This is an important point. This is a very important point, is that you're very knowledgeable, and really you're just kind of keeping them in check. It's you're letting them do what they need to do, and you're giving them free reign, like you said, but you also are aware of pricing, procedures, timelines. That's why you're doing well.
Yeah.
Is because of that. Yeah.
So and that's all our control, right? So you can learn from something like for me, I know that like you could probably renovate 2 units per month, about $10,000 to $15,000, right? Brand new, and that's a good team, right? And if the team's like, well, how come you're only doing one a month? What happened? Was there some major thing that was unanticipated, right? If that's the case, then great, that's fine. I know the answer, but if not, it's like, well, you're slacking, right? And and generally contractors, and the mistake I made was in mobile home, I paid them by hour. Well, guess what happens with hourly employees? Whether I work hard or not hard, I get paid whatever, $15 an hour. Right? So eventually people get lazy. That's human nature. I know human nature is they get lazy, they get complacent. That's how we are wired. We are wired to get complacent to save energy. And because I know that human psychology, I have to constantly like light a fire underneath them. Right? Like literally my mobile home park, it got delayed closing by 15 days. I said, literally every 15 days that you delayed it, you're costing me money. You're costing me profit every day that's delayed. Right? And I'll tell them up like how much it is. Like, you're costing me $500 a day every day that you're delayed. Right? So just know. So I kind of tell them like, hey, I want to do business with you like long term, but like, if this is how you're shooting me in the foot and you're not gonna maybe give me a concession or do something to make up for it, then I know how you treat your customers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And like, do you value the relationship or not? So I kind of know, right? That's why I said, like, I'm testing. I tell my property managers, hey, I'm great to work with, but I want to buy more deals, and I want to do a small deal with you first, but I want to scale with you, so both our businesses will grow, right? But let's prove yourself. You prove yourself to me. I'll prove me to you that you want to work with me, right? And then once you have that track record, then you just hit all that. So that's basically, so basically, if you have that mindset, you buy equity day one, you can force appreciation, you'll never lose in multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then you have to have that patience and that timeline too, right? Like for me, I thought if you asked me a year and a half ago to 2 years, I think I'm retired by now, right? But I had every delay possible happen to me. It took 6 months to like, they're gonna say, oh, Steven, I can renovate, two, whatever, 4 per month. That's not the reality. It's gonna be like 2 at best, right? So because I know that, I think the brokers or the property managers and the general contractors are used to saying that because they don't want they're used to the owner getting angry, right? But for me, I'm like, well, why are you telling me more? Just be realistic with me, So usually they say, oh, we can do 4 per month. I'll be like, I'll be happy if you do 3. Like, and they're usually like thrown off by that, like, oh shoot, like he's actually happy.
They have to stick to it though. They have to actually.
Now they have to stick to it, right? Because I'm like, I actually lowered my standard. In reality, I know probably 2 is a realistic number. So I'm like, oh, if I get 3, I actually kind of win a little bit. So it's just kind of like that little hack that I do for them. So, that's just kind of been my experience, with managing that. And like I said, you have to be engaged. You have to be informed. I do study a lot about real estate. It gets repetitive after a while, but like, I think I just learned the most by doing it because I renovated 40 units in 1 year. And I just learned, I got a crash course on renovation with mobile homes as well as apartments. So I kind of know at this point, like, like hard money loan, like 12 months plus 3-month extension, I probably have to extend it by 3 months. And at that point, once I start getting around close to that 90%, I'm going to start engaging lenders to say, hey, look, I've rented out like whatever, 10 units in like the span of like 5 months. So I'm telling them the story, right? So once you kind of have that story, that's how you pitch it to the lenders. Hey, look what I did. I fixed up these 10 units. I rented up 2 per month. This is the rents I'm getting. Same in the mobile home park. That's how I sold my mobile home park too. I basically brought in brand new homes, infilled it, rented it out for $70 a month. I did it for 2. Now I can sell a story to a larger operator. Look what I did. You can repeat my process. I've proven it already, right? So I'm handing them the value add plan. They just got to continue it. And I have all the resources there already. I have the lending contact. I have the mobile home dealer. I know I have the installers. I know all the costs associated with that already. So for you, you don't have any guesswork. It's already done. So I laid it on a platter for the next seller. So that's how I got like a good offer, right? For the deal. And I priced, so basically I bought this seller financed, right? But I'm seller carrying second a little bit too. So my profit is seller carry second lien position. So I get back all my initial money, right? Maybe a little bit, maybe not all, but a good like 90% of it. And my profit and the remaining 10% is trapped in the deal and seller second, but I'm getting paid interest on that deal, right? And then when they finish the value add, then I get paid out my profits. So I'm removed of of all that. So I just said it just makes sense for me. And then you know, if you listen to my other videos, I talk about like just don't diversify, just be great at one asset class, not good at like 2 or 3. And like you said, by me doing my mobile home park in Alabama, I took my eye off my mobile home park. So once I sell my mobile home park, I just want to double down Oklahoma City. I know it very well. I already know Oklahoma City, $65,000 per unit renovated. So if I can buy it at $30,000 per unit, put in $10,000 each, that's 40. My profit margin is 25,000 per unit. You can cash out refinance, get all your money back for sure, right? If it's a tertiary market, I know it's 50K per unit, right? So if you can buy at 20K, renovate for 10K, you're all in 30K, then your margin is 20K per unit. So I know that it's easy for me. I know what the rents are going to be, and I know the area, and I have my system ready in place. So it's almost like I can close my eyes for my next deals, and I don't have to be as active. I mean, besides kind of holding them accountable and, you know, just trust but verify, right? And they know my expectations, even they worked for me before. So, you know, once you kind of have that, it's easy to scale. So I'm like, I can easily scale. I can double my portfolio in Oklahoma and probably not be that much more stressed, you know, to be honest. So I know that I can go at a slow pace, and, you know, down the road, if I want to raise money, it's gonna be so easy. Like, I already have a system there already. So basically, as the investor, you already knew I have already a team there, and I've done like 2 value add deals there already, and I already have a good team that's been vetted, the good contractors that have been vetted. Like, it'd be so easy for me if I choose to go down that route, you know, down the road. So, you know, that's just kind of my experience there. Any other questions, Will?
No, you covered a lot. You covered a terrific amount. So yeah, answered most everything.
Yeah. So basically, like, you know, kind of back to that deal that you're working with, like you said, once you know what that price per unit is, once it's fixed up, that's your margin, you know, and it seems like if you're getting at 26K per unit, that's pretty, you cannot build a brand new 300, you know, unit apartment complex for 27K per unit. If you build it brand new, it's going to be way more than that, you know?
In that particular property, I'm not going to be having ownership interest there.
Yeah, you're selling it, but like when you're selling to like an investor, that's how you think, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely, right.
you know, that's your margin. Like, what's the cost to renovate it, you know, per unit? And then at that point, you know, can they carry the cost? Because, like, you know, it's I haven't done a full, like, where it's 100% vacant, and then you're just renovating on the unit. Like, to me, it's a lot of pressure because you're not getting any cash flow in whatsoever. You know, for me, I like it at least like some occupancy, but who knows, down the road, maybe I might do one where, because I do see a lot of great deals where it is 100% vacant. But, you know, there's some risk associated with that as well. But, you know, that's what I would be thinking as the investor. And honestly, if I was buying that deal, I would be thinking, can I do creative financing in this deal? So is it owned free and clear? And if it's not owned free and clear, could I do subject to, where I'm taking over the payments on the property, and then I'll pay you the gap between the loan and what the purchase price is at whatever 6-7% interest only, but I'm hoping to defer that interest payments for 1 year, and I'll add it to you in the back end of the loan when it's due. That's what I would be asking you if I was buying that deal.
And I'm personally one that enjoys creative financing, and I think brokers don't like it, especially brokers at the big shops, is because they see it as one more hurdle that they
Yeah.
have to overcome, and it's really not. You know, personally, I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for someone that would specialize in creative financing
Yeah.
because so few people know how to do it well. They don't understand how to pitch it, how to structure it, how to get across obstacles. I mean, I'm sure you understand the alienation clause with subject to how to deal with those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
So that's why I go, like, when I leave my W-2, that's what I wanted to go into, where I'd be like a broker who like specializes in creative financing, because like you said, like, it's kind of sad. Like, I have to teach the broker, who then has to teach the seller, and the message gets misconstrued, and the broker may not be motivated. Like, this is so much work. I don't want to do this. I just want my, yeah.
That's another really good
Yeah.
actual episode you could have is brokers. You know, when I think to myself, someone asked me, I was watching something somewhere, and someone asked me, how many deals have you put together? And I rattled it off. I said, no. How many have you actually structured? We're not talking about just buyer and seller and, you know, help them with the loan. Going in, digging deep, and creatively negotiating and putting the pieces together. I've only done that a handful of times. And that's something I want to really get into. And that's why a lot of what I do, I don't have a lot of transactions. Usually they're just a few a year.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them are off market. Those are the best ones, truly off market.
So yeah, like once you match, like when I saw my property manager, like, you basically have to sell or carry second. So he told me up front. And I just said, okay, I knew my expectations. Like, I'm not the seller carry second some money for a certain amount of time, but as long as I get majority of my money back, I'm happy. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a win-win situation where I get my money back. They have to down less. Right. And at this point, I'm still getting interest on that money. So it's not like it's stagnant money. Right. Better than sitting in the bank. And then I'm getting paid, and eventually I'll get paid out my lump sum. So like, if people did that, or where a broker, hey Steven, I negotiate this apartment complex. It's going to be 10% down or 20% down, broken 5% over 4 years. And this cash flow might be enough where that covers that 5% down every year. So you're almost in this deal 0% down. And I negotiate 0% interest deferred for the first year. So you just have to do this. I have this like renovation team already here. It's in customers per unit. I'm like, at this point, it's a no-brainer. It doesn't matter. Do I have the money?
That's right.
Right. So that's why brokers aren't willing to go that. The majority of them will not go that extra mile. But if you're willing to do that, it translates very well. So that's why, like, for me, I essentially brokered 3 deals because I worked directly with the seller, right? So I was the one writing all the contracts. I mean, fortunately in Oklahoma, it's standard templates. So you just go on the official website, write it out. But the other stuff, you just like write little amendments here and there, and you just explain it like, hey, I want $60,000 of seller repair credit. Or obviously, if it's more complicated seller financing, you're usually your title company will help you, or if it's Alabama, it's a title attorney state, so the attorney works on it anyways. They do most of the work for you. So that's kind of your person looking behind your back to make sure it's correct. And you can ask your title, like, hey, like what's the contract for this country, for this state? So I think that's going to be the next wave of successful brokers and investors, is the ones who can be creative.
I think it'll stay with investors because I've really studied it and taken it apart. And I think that for a broker to be an investor, you see it's very difficult because the commission is the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And they only seemingly see things in terms of, well, how do I extract my commission? Whereas a good property manager or a good investor will say, well, how do we get this thing to cash flow right? How do we get it operationally where it needs to be? And that's why it's very challenging for a broker to really think in those terms. It's almost impossible. I mean, sometimes I've struggled with it. Like, well, wait, hold on. This is a lot easier. I just shut up. And so that's why I spend a lot of, I try to think more as an investor.
Yeah. So you hit the nail right in the head there, where they're just so focused on the transaction, because it's transactional, right? I sell X property for this price, I get 3% or 6%, whatever it's negotiated. And that's what they're all focused on. Like, I'm just focused on getting that like $30,000 check. And
yeah, because I mean, in commercial, very, very often, and it could be applicable to any real estate, is that there's an unlimited loss, if I don't have a tenant, if a tenant doesn't renew on one of these shopping centers. Well, now I'm doing capital calls, and I've done those before, where capital calls is a euphemism where you have to pay money in, you have to pay the debt, you're underwater, and you have to do that for a duration, and that happens a lot. So as a broker, there's kind of this stop loss, like you limit your liability, and you capture, you get capped capturing the upside, but you get capped on the downside, and you can just operate in that narrow band. So that's another reason. So, but I think a very good investor will spend more time thinking about how to improve the property, how to cash flow it, how to make money from it. And again, that's I'm getting repetitive, but you get my point.
It's the bigger picture. So great. I know it's late where you're at. You have any final questions?
No, I didn't. It's been a very good talk. Thank you for having me on. I hope I've been helpful. So
yeah, no. I think it would be amazing value if you ever found like a deal on Crexy, and then we can like underwrite it together like live. If you'd be open to that, I think that'd be a lot of value. Just whatever public deal, because I advocate for my students to actually go on LoopNet and Crexy to underwrite 100 deals in your market, so you can learn the market. All those deals will be terrible, but at least you know what a deal shouldn't look like, and you can see how performers are like fabricated slightly to make it look better, and it'll help you when you actually get a good deal, to the point where if I see a good deal, I already know immediately, like I'm probably gonna buy this deal, right? Like, yeah, based on how good it is. So I think that'd be helpful, because I know with what you're doing, it's mostly the lease, right? So I think it'd be helpful to like just analyze like a lease and kind of see what to look for, and kind of what the pitfalls are. I think that'd do a lot of value.
Yeah, so it'd take a little time, but I think I could find a lease and just redact out some of the personal info and the names, and I could quickly go through. I mean, there's just dozens and dozens of little tidbits that I don't even read anywhere. Like when you're dealing with a tenant, and you're negotiating when the lease is to start. And there's a tenant improvement, they're doing construction. Is it on the application of the permit, or is it at the approval of the permit? Well, that could be 6 or 7 weeks or 7 months or whatever. I mean, that little details like that are so critical. They can change. And these attorneys, they drop things into leases. You'll be reading about a topic, and then it'll have something extremely important, like who pays for the HVAC, just kind of tucked in there. So I can help with those things.
Yeah, and like fortunately for me, because I'm a pharmacy director, pharmacy law is pretty complicated, so I'm used to reading contracts and like interpreting law. But yeah, you have to read those contracts a couple of times, and you'll catch little nuggets here and there that you missed. So no, great. Well, thank you for hopping on and staying up and giving value on this, and hopefully you learned a little bit about multifamily and mobile parks as well. So
great. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Will. All right, have a good one, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.